Good morning. We have any visitors this morning? Any visitors? From where?
From Knoxville, Tennessee.
Welcome. Anybody else? Okay. Welcome to you all. In the second reading today from the letter to the Hebrews, which I recommend to you for your reading, spiritual reading this week, to pick up the letter to the Hebrews. It's a fascinating letter. But in it, in this 11th chapter, the author traces kind of the history of faith, which in fact is the history of the man Abraham. Abraham, as we've talked about so often here, lived in a time when God was not known. People worshipped what they didn't understand. So they worshipped the lightning and the rain and the fertility and all these other things. And it was to Abraham that God revealed himself. And then he asked him to trust him. And then he took him on this odyssey that seemed to go on forever. And you'd say to yourself, well, why did he do it? And that's what the book of Hebrews talks about today, Abraham's enduring faith. That he experienced God, and having experienced God, he was willing to trust. So God led him on a journey. And he said, follow me. And he left his homeland when he was actually in his 70s. And he took him and his wife and his family, and they just moved around, and God kept moving them around. And he promised Abraham that he would have a child. And the years went on, and there was no child. And finally, a few weeks ago, we heard in the scripture how the angels visited Abraham and Sarah, and she had the child Isaac when they were in their 90s. What an act of faith, huh? So, this particular passage talks to us about faith, and it starts out by saying that faith is the realization of what is hoped for. That if we have faith, the realization of what we've hoped for happens. And it's evidence of things not seen. Because of it, the ancients were well attested. And he goes on to tell the story of Abraham. And so today, we need to examine our life of faith. And we need to challenge ourselves as Abraham was challenged. That sometimes God leads us on an odyssey. Sometimes he leads us on a journey that we do not understand. But in following God's will, in being compliant to what God has asked of us, nonetheless, good things can ultimately happen. Just as it did for Abraham, just as it did for his family. In the gospel today, Jesus talks to us about faith as well. He talks to us about faith in a different way. He tells us not to be afraid any longer. He says that if we trust in God, then we will do as God asks us to do, that our lives will always be in a state of preparedness. Our lives will always be in a state of readiness, because we know that God is going to be with us and intervene in our lives at any moment. The promises that he's made to us will happen if our hearts are ready. The promises that he has made to us will in fact come to life within our lives if we are ready. But what happens is we lose our way, and that's what Jesus is talking about in the gospel today. When he tells us to keep our lamps lit, when he tells us, all he's saying in poetic language is stay focused. Stay focused on the Lord. And even when things aren't going the way you think they should or where you think they should, stay focused on the Lord. And on staying focused on the Lord, you will come to experience the realization of things hoped for. You will come to know that your faith will be vindicated. But we lose sight. Our faith kind of becomes like dieting, We try, but we just can't do it. We try, but we just can't stay focused. We try, but we get distracted. We try, but our thoughts and our hopes and our dreams go elsewhere. So Jesus is encouraging us in the gospel today to be like the good servant who, when the master puts him in charge of something, he does it right. He doesn't play loose and fast with the rules. He doesn't pretend, well, it won't happen. The master's away for a long time. He's not coming home tonight. And that's the night he comes home. Now, we all do that, don't we? I'll just hide this here for now and no one will know. And then sure enough, it comes out. We all do that, but we can't do it with faith. Faith requires of us that, first of all, we recognize the centrality of God in our lives, and then secondly, that we recognize the fact that this part on earth is only part of our lives, and that this is preparation for our life with God, which will be forever. But we get stuck here. We begin to think that we're going to live forever. We begin to think that everything we have will be forever. We begin to think and get secure in our fantasies that nothing can touch us. That was the story of last week's gospel about the guy with the great harvest, and he built bigger barns. And what happened? After he built the bigger barns, he sat back and said, "Now I'm set for life," which ended that night. So, today, let us focus on faith. And let us truly, like Abraham, take the concept of faith and challenge ourselves. Are we following God? Or do we get tired? Do we get unfocused? Do we get beset by other temptations? If we follow as Abraham followed, then the realization of faith will happen. Good things will come to be. We'll begin to see the world in a new way, not according to our needs and our agenda, but according to the bigger picture of God, the agenda which God has set for us. Sometimes we do not know the good that we do just by our presence somewhere. Sometimes we do not know the good that we do by a word or a kindly gesture. Sometimes we don't know the good that we do by the goodness that we have in our hearts. I know as an old teacher that I have students who come see me on the street or whatever, who I can't even recognize, have no idea who they are, who say to me, "Do you remember the day in school that you said this to me?" Yeah, right, I don't remember. But nonetheless, it must have had an impact on their life. It must have had an impact. So we don't know how God uses us. We don't know how God will, in fact, even in the midst of our pain and desperation, in the midst of our confusion or loneliness, in the midst of whatever it is we suffer, that somehow God can use us for the good of others. So today, stay the course. Today, let's focus on faith. Today, let's be men and women who truly do believe that God is in command, who truly do believe that God is the center of all we do and say. Faith is the realization of things hoped for. Faith will be vindicated when all the good things that God has promised will in fact come true in our lives. It happens. It happened to Abraham, the father of faith, and it will happen to us if we stay the course, if we stay focused, if we do not weaken, if we refuse to take our eyes off Christ, if we refuse to be distracted by other things, if we stay focused on God and on God alone, we will come to know the fullness of faith. That's not fantasy. That's reality. Be at peace.